What?
Sir, I will put a small question. Whether the lawyering in India and other countries is almost same, like in US or Europe, whether the position of lawyer is the same as in India or it differs.
Shall I respond, sir?
Yes, sir. Please.
See, basically the lawyer, even though we are all common law countries, England, Britain, United States of America, India, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, we are all following the common law system. The commonness ends there. Practicing in various jurisdictions, we can say that various jurisdictions, America, Britain, Australia, Canada, India, different. In India, we attach more value to morality. In India, it is a service, it is a profession. It is a profession where you are guided by ethics, morality. You are more accountable. Whereas in United States of America, it is a business, it is a trade. So, morality has very little significance there. You have that famous dialogue between Hart and Fuller, HLA Hart and Leon Fuller. Hart Fuller debates. Hart opined that there is nothing called morality, whereas Fuller said there is an inner morality. And we, our lawyers, we are governed by the Advocates Act. And the Advocates Act prescribes certain limits for lawyers. So practicing law in India is remarkably different from practicing in other countries. Now another thing, there are certain common features also. I will tell you, one common feature is the institutions of law firms. See, these law firms are there in India as well as in America or Britain. But that also in India also that this mercantile character of legal profession is setting in. We have this arbitration cases, we have this land acquisition cases, we have this motor accident claim cases, where all ethics and morality play a secondary role only. So, in a way, now, with this World Trade Agreement, with this confluence of various jurisdictions on the international global platform, there is what you call more and more common features for practicing law in India and other jurisdictions. But if you are practicing only Indian law, only the domestic law, the civil law and criminal law, still you have to follow the earlier course. This is my brief response to Dr. Mani Saab, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, anybody else, sir?
Good morning, sir.
Yeah.
Advocate Girish here.
Yes, Girish ji.
Sir, on behalf of all students, I would like to raise a question.
Yes, please.
Sir, what is the true duty of a lawyer? To defend the client or to bring justice before the court? For example, one client comes to a lawyer and he is telling that I killed one person. What is the duty of a lawyer? To defend that client or to bring a justice to the court?
Shall I respond, Mr. Girish?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's my question.
See, your question is pregnant with demands of morality. Your question is punctuated by caveats for a lawyer. I will quote one quote from Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet. Act well your part, there all honor lies. A lawyer has to act as a lawyer. and how he has to act as a lawyer while confronting the question raised by Advocate Girish. See, all other things we forget for the time being. We keep in mind the lawyer and the court and the client and the judge and the opponent, opposite lawyer. What is the duty of this lawyer? This lawyer has to get justice to the client. So he has to dissect and display the case of his client before the court. There would be a prosecution process. Prosecution would be bringing the evidence. I need not bring evidence against me. Prosecution would be conducting the prosecution, initiating the trial, initiating the hearing, argument. And I am the defense. And your question, you meant the lawyer to be a defense lawyer. And the lawyer has to be alert to the requirement of law, justice on the one hand, and the requirement of the client on the other hand. He should not be wrongly punished, condemned. Whether he has committed that act or not is immaterial. He should not be wrongly punished in violation of Article 21 of the Constitution of India. No one shall be deprived of his right to life and personal liberty except by procedure established by law. So when 32 accused persons in Babri Masjid case are acquitted by the trial court, eyebrows were raised along the length and breadth of India, you know. The media was agog with criticism of the judge, criticism of the accused, criticism of the government, central government, state government. But I read the judgment. A judge can decide the case only on the basis of the arguments advanced before him, evidence placed before him, the oral evidence and documentary evidence, and the reports of the investigating officers. A judge cannot go on a fishing expedition. A judge has to be a judge, every inch a judge, he has to be disciplined. And this lawyer will be trying to interpret the principles and interpret the position in such a way that it should be upright, it should be correct interpretation. And if correct interpretation is made, even if you are doing it for your client, the court will come to the correct conclusion. So, to put it in a very simple way, the lawyer has to be intellectually honest. The lawyer has to be honest towards his client. And he must be vigilant. Whether he is wrongly convicted, that should not be. That is why we say that you should be proved beyond reasonable doubt. So the lawyer has a duty to the court, duty to the opposite side, duty to his client also. But above all, he has a duty to his conscience. He must be fair. Fairness principle. That is it. I think that was a general question which Mr. Girish asked me, which I could only answer generally. But by bringing in one example, recent example, I have demonstrated that even when we know that disputed structure was demolished by the mob, where all these accused persons were also present. But the court says that there is no evidence. It is for the judge. In Mahabharata, when the war is at its height, Krishna dips the chariot of Arjuna by 1 foot. It is a Dharma Yuddha, they say. Why did Krishna do that? Dipping the chariot wheel 1 foot so that Karna's Nagastra will not hit Arjun. Why did Rama kill Bali by darting an arrow from behind a tree? Is it fair? But that was required under Dharma. So the question of justice, if a person is to be illogically, unjustly sentenced to contempt, that is the duty of the lawyer to defend. He is called a defense lawyer. Girish, I hope I could explain a little bit.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Now, may I just interfere and with regard to the answer given to Grish Kumar lawyer?
Yes,
Justice to
please,
the client.
please.
Justice to the client. Well, justice is it to be approached as a relative concept or justice in a general form, not as a relative concept. Justice to the client.
Sir, shall I answer that? Shall I respond?
Please, sir.
See, justice as a general thing is philosophy. Justice as a relative thing is jurisprudence. So, a lawyer, the test or the decision which he takes, the most crucial decision a lawyer takes is while accepting the brief. See, when a client comes to you, he will be stating his case to you. There you can decide, no, I am not for this case. You just approach somebody else. But once you have applied your mind and taken a decision to take the case, then you are the client. Advaitam, both are same. The client and the lawyer are the same. The lawyer slips into the shoes of the client. When you stand up, the court asks you, who are you? The lawyer cannot tell his name. Lawyer is to tell the name of the client. Who are you? I am accused number 1. That is what the lawyer says. So, then relative things. See, we will take that concept of objective correlative. See, what is the object? How can you correlate it? As far as a particular case in a court of law, the object is that case which is to be tried and decided. So then you correlate it to the lawyer. Then the lawyer has to see only that case, nothing else.
One more addition
Sir.
relating to the Babri Masjid demolition. Visibility to the naked eye. Had the judge been there near that particular meeting happening, the leaders on the dais, dismantling of the structure, he sees visibly. Can there be an invisibility through the approach of law?
No invisibility at all. It was demolished in front of the glaring eyes of all persons who were there. But nobody saw any of these 32 persons doing it. Nobody saw that, and even the Supreme Court in the 5 judges bench decision of November 14th of Babri Masjid, this Rama Janmabhoomi case, Supreme Court said that that demolition of that structure is to be deprecated. That is a word used by Supreme Court. That is to be deprecated. See, a case which happened, an incident which happened in 1992 is decided in 2020. In between, how many governments came? How many political parties ruled India? None of them. Even those who criticize it now are only for taking political mileage only. Simply for that. Not out of any sympathy for the community which got hurt with the demolition of the structure. That is the problem. So that is an aspect which is outside our jurisprudence. I can tell you, during the British period, when 3 judges of the Madras High Court were having an evening stroll along the Marina Beach, one judge was an Indian judge, 2 were British judges. Indian judge's name was Kunjiraman, Justice Kunjiraman. So, while they were having their evening stroll, they were eyewitnesses to an altercation in which one man was stabbed to death. When this case came for trial, all these 3 High Court judges were summoned as witnesses in the trial court. See, the 2 British judges said that I have seen with my own eyes that this man stabbing that deceased person. And when it came to the Indian judge, he said that I was looking in some other direction there. And that judge was subsequently called Kunjiraman. Kunjiraman became Kunjiraman because he was stooping. He was looking somewhere else. So that is evidence. The judge cannot do anything. The trial judge has to accept or reject whatever is before him.
Justice seemed to be done.
That is Lord Howard in 1929 in an article he observed that justice should not only be done but it should manifestly and undoubtedly be seen to be done. That is for a naked eye, for an impartial person. He should have the belief that justice is done. And the lawyers and judges will try to decide the cases. Lawyers, 99.9% of lawyers would only think in terms of the benefit of their client. See, in 1998, third judge's case came to Supreme Court, wherein the appointment of High Court judges and Supreme Court judges became the exclusive reserve of the Supreme Court. And the senior most advocate in India today, Justice Fali Nariman, appeared and defended that in favor of the court. But after 5 years, Justice Sri Nariman said that I repent my appearance in that case and winning that case. So that happens always. See, judges left between judges and lawyers. Lawyers are the the force or structure of this profession and administration of justice. Judges come and go, but lawyers remain as a community. That is why we are teaching the students to become good lawyers. And it is from among the good lawyers that we must get good judges. The quality of the bench is always correlated to the quality of the bar. If we have good bar, a bold bar, a bar with fortitude, wisdom, we will have good judges.
Thank you.
Okay. Then, sir?
Any other questions? All right, so sir can continue.
Okay.
Okay.
See, I have
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Hi, this is Advocate Insha. I'm a faculty member over here. Sir, I have a question. What is the stand of women lawyers in litigation practice?
shall
There
I?
are some, girl students over here, so it would be nice if you express your opinion.
First of all, can I hear your name once again? No?
This is Advocate Insha Iqbal, and I'm a teaching faculty over here
Okay.
in Hindustan School of Law.
Okay, very good. Insha Iqbal. Okay.
Yeah.
See, your question is very pertinent, current. And
Yes.
the question which is relevant. Earlier, this was a area where women or ladies were not coming frequently, flowing in. Now, legal profession has got a sizable chunk of lawyers from the fair sex, or I don't know whether I can use the word fair sex, from among women. You want me to express my opinion or answer what is the possibility, what is the potential of women lawyers. See, women
My
lawyers.
position currently I see that women are fairly discriminated in court practice. So I'm asking, is it so? And about your opinion about that.
See,
Should women lawyers come forward for litigation practice?
See, my dear daughter, my wife is a lawyer, my daughter is a lawyer, my son is a lawyer, and I have been teaching law for about 30 years as a part-time faculty, visiting faculty. I have a number of hundreds of lady law students who are now occupying the profession in pivotal places where judicial officers are there, their lawyers are there, public prosecutors are there. The saying that legal profession is not good for women is a myth, I will say. It is a myth. You break it. Profession is there all for you, all for women. How a woman who was a munsif in Kerala rose to the position of a judge of the Supreme Court. How many chief justices are there in high courts, women? And if it is for the legal education centers like Hindustan Institute of Technology and other law schools to give an extra confidence to women or lady students, there should not be any discrimination on the basis of sex in theory or in practice. My opinion is that I am looking very fondly for a day when I can address in the Supreme Court a lady chief justice. But that is not happening because of our system. So, empowerment of women. This sector is an important, area for empowering women. My personal view is that just like you give a reservation to backward community people or those who were undergoing social and economic backwardness, underprivileges earlier, now given constitutional protection by reservation under Article 15 and 16, women should be given reservation if required by amending the constitution, especially in the professions like law and other professions. This is my opinion. They should be very confident. They should be, see, compared to other branches in criminal law, comparatively women lawyers are less. Why? Because you have to interact with prosecution, you have to interact with investigating officers, you have to interact with so many things. Anyway, comparatively. But now that is also being broken. My submission is that this is a field as much for women or ladies as for men. There should not be any gender discrimination, at least in this sector. I hope I could at least partially respond to your query.
Yeah, yes, sir.
We must give confidence to the say, I have heard lady students who used to take too much liberties with me, just like they take liberties with their parents. But that is the charm of it. That is the thrill of it. When they call you, they know that I sleep late and wake up early. Some during examinations and all, some of them used to call me at 4:30 a.m. They take this thing. So that is because we must give them favorable ecosystem. The ecosystem of legal education should be such that women, lady students should love to come more and more. See, doctor profession is a medical profession, nursing profession, lot of women are there. Just like that, there should be more and more facilities to women in this profession. And they will be very industrious also. See, I will tell you a personal experience here. When I shifted my practice from Kerala High Court to Supreme Court in 2005, I had a number of cases. My work was very at its height here. Then several of my friends asked me why you want to leave this sure place and go to an uncertain place called the Supreme Court. I said, if you want to climb Everest, you have to go to Everest. No, there is no other go. You just see it. When I left this station and went to Supreme Court, my wife had to take charge of as the senior of the office. Then she used to go to the court prepared, very well prepared, and she never takes adjournment. So often I used to come from Delhi and used to go to High Court on some particular cases. Then my friends used to say, see, when you were coming in the opposite side, we could take adjournments, we could make adjustments and all. See, your wife, this lady, she will not even compromise even for an adjournment and all. Every case, she is always ready. And she comes here and sits in the court. See, that is what we admire. You should be, at least you should give a good this thing of your preparation to the opposite. But you have to adjust a lot. Not like women have to prepare their mind in such a way that there should not be any inhibitions. There should not be any inhibitions for women to join the profession. That is.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, welcome.
Sir, this is Dr. Pandiraj. I'm also a faculty member at H School of Law.
Yes, Mr. Pandiraj.
Sir, I just want to say a few words about the verdict given by the CBI court in the Babri Masjid demolition case. Just two things I just wanted to highlight. One is that this verdict comes, and this verdict of 32 people getting scot-free comes after less than a year, 1 year of the Supreme Court, the same Supreme Court saying that the demolition of this particular act was illegal, and also it amounted to an egregious violation of the rule of law. Now, this verdict has been the latest one, freeing the 32 people who were accused of having demolished this structure comes after this verdict, in which it was found clearly by the Supreme Court that the demolition was illegal as well as the egregious violation of rule of law. So this is something very ironic. And the second thing that I would like to highlight is that things have not been very easy for a number of people, number of stakeholders, especially people who have been defending the human rights, rule of law, or democracy in India. And so there is a context in which these things take place. And moreover, this is a verdict that has been given by a special CBI court, and we all know how independent the CBI is, and in the past, many governments have used this institution in order to do a number of dirty works, and there are many examples that can be given. So what I'm saying is that it is a judgment which calls for serious questioning, and in my personal view, I could be wrong as well. And this is not justice that has been delivered. It is nothing but a kind of travesty of justice that has been delivered to the people. This is what I wanted to share with you, sir.
So, shall I respond, Mr. Pandiraj?
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
See, only one thing I disagree with you. You have mixed the fact with fiction about this case. About the factual aspect, I am with you. About the fiction which you have added to it, I cannot support you being a practicing lawyer. I will explain now. See, the CBI court, special court in Lucknow, has acquitted all these accused 32 persons. Your query is, this is done despite the finding of the Supreme Court in the Ayodhya case, constitutional bench judgment, that the destruction of the structure was not correct, deprecated. First of all, I will tell you one thing. We are lawyers, we are professionals. In the Supreme Court judgment, there was no finding. It was only an observation. First of all, that was not the issue. Destruction of the structure was not the issue before the constitution bench, and nowhere in the judgment you see that treated as an issue and a finding of the court. But being sensible and alert to what is happening around this institution, Supreme Court is not merely a court of law, it is a court of justice also. So Supreme Court observed that we are not commenting on that. Destroying that structure is deprecated. It is to be criticized. And you know, Mr. Pandiraj, in 2017, this issue of a criminal case came before the Supreme Court. Justice Nariman was leading the bench. You know, section 120B was omitted earlier. It was under the instance of the Supreme Court in 2017 that 120B also, criminal conspiracy also was added and then send it for trial on a day-to-day basis. That is why the matter got decided now. But the Supreme Court even there also did not make any finding. Supreme Court said that you add what was omitted, 120B. And here, I cannot say, you cannot say that it is correct to demolish that. Even I hold the view that the demolition of the structure was bad in law. It was sending bad signal to a minority community. It was shaking the confidence of a section of the people in the rule of law concept in India. It was sending bad signal to the outer world also. But this court, this case, we have to see the judgment only now. Discussion by the judge, whether the judge was biased, whether the judge was looking like the Kunjaraman, earlier I said Kunjaraman, whether the judge was fair or judge was upright, that is immaterial here. He has become a functus officio now, after the judgment. Now I say that it has to be taken in appeal. It can be taken in appeal to the higher court, high court, then Supreme Court. What is done, we cannot say. Only thing is that the court has said that it was not demolished by these people. There was no criminal conspiracy at all. It was the work of a mob, members of a mob. And mob psychology, you know. Mob psychology, it is very easy to change the mindset of the mob, members of the mob. When everything was conclusively said that Julius Caesar was a traitor, Julius Caesar was not good ruler after Brutus' speech, then comes Mark Antony. And Mark Antony addresses the same mob. I have come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. He started. And then he took the mob with him. It is a mob psychology. I don't say that what is done is correct. But I do say that in the judgment, only thing is that it is not done by these people. No criminal conspiracy. On the basis of this evidence, you can take it up to the higher courts. And Mr. Pandirajan, there is a section of people who has opinion that this has been wrongly done. But what about the distance travelled by this case from 1992 to 2020? In 2009, you see this commission report by Justice Farhan was given to the Prime Minister. And Lebanon Commission had found categorically that there is a complicity or duplicity of these people. Several people named them. Then why did in 2009 the Congress Ministry by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao slept over this commission report? See, Mr. Pandiraj, some cases are doomed politically. Doomed cases are there. You know, Mr. Pandiraj, in 1975, one railway minister was killed in bomb blast at Samastipur railway station in Bihar. His name was L.N. Mishra. L.N. Mishra was the right hand of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. L.N. Mishra's murder, it was bomb explosion, it was murder. That case was decided last year before last only. See, how many years? 1975. So our system, this is the peril of Indian, our justice system. What is to be done in time must be done in time, and if it is done out of time, will not be considered as done at all. That is it. But Mr. Pandiraj, being a law teacher, being a lawyer also, I have maintained one thing strictly in my career. We must be objective and we should not take sides, and we must not be partial, even in the classroom or outside, because we have to give correct perspective to the people, listeners. That is what is required. Even to the students also, I may be having an opinion about this issue on my personal inclination or political belief. But as a teacher, as a lawyer, as a public person, I should be objective. I should be having a perspective, balanced, and I should take care of the sentiments of all people. I think I could at least a fraction of explanation given to Mr. Pandiraj. Okay. Mr. Pandiraj, you have got any supplementary question or anything? Manish sir, we have another 24 minutes.
Okay, sir, you can discuss on.
Shall I?
And comments.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. See, I had made some general observations. I have tried to raise an interest, to generate an interest, which I hope will become perennial interest in the minds of the students who listen to me. And see, this is a time when you will be learning law from different angles. Okay, I told you the importance of jurisprudence. I told you what is the road ahead for you, the days ahead for you, the years ahead for you will be the travel along a very fertile field. Suppose something like traveling along the Indo-Gangetic plain, a very beautiful, very attractive, very illustrative time in your life you are going to spend as law students, and you will be studying, as I said, jurisprudence directly and indirectly. And I would like to mention to you some of the important branches which you will be learning, not only for your examination's sake, but for your entire career. Apart from jurisprudence, in science you study chemistry, and you might have heard of a subject called applied chemistry. What is applied chemistry? It is also chemistry. Like that, you will be studying applied jurisprudence in your course. What is applied jurisprudence? Applied jurisprudence is an example of applied jurisprudence is special jurisprudence is specific jurisprudence is constitutional law. See, in England, if you say that I have not taken the book with me, no, I don't have the book with me, what does he means, the person? What does it mean in England to say the book? The book in England means the Holy Bible. The book. They need not say Holy Bible. They can say the book means there is only one book. That is the Bible, Holy Bible. Like that, for lawyers in India, we have a book. The book. The book is this book. I think you can see this. The Constitution of India. See, that is the book. Everything comes under this. So, that is applied jurisprudence. See, you will be studying this Constitution in one paper or two papers, and it is jurisprudence, applied jurisprudence. The distinction between a lawyer and a layman is jurisprudence. So this constitutional law is the most required, most indispensable factor for a lawyer, whether practicing in the Mofussil court, in the High Court, or in the Supreme Court, or elsewhere before arbitration tribunal, commission, anywhere. This is the book, and this is the peculiarity of the judiciary also. When we say that this book, under this book, institutions are established. We have executive, cabinet, we have legislature, parliament and state legislatures, we have judiciary, state judiciary and union judiciary, Supreme Court of India. And this book prescribes the script for all institutions. And in 1950, when this book was adopted by we the people of India, having solemnly resolved to make ourselves into a sovereign socialist republic, sovereign socialist secular republic, that socialist and secular came later. So this is the book. Interpretation, nothing can go beyond the scope of this book. And the life of law in India, the life of a lawyer in India is the working under this text called Constitution of India. I refer to Fali S. Nariman. Fali S. Nariman is now, I think he might have reached 90 years of age. He has written his autobiography, Before the Memory Fades. That is the name of the book. Before the Memory Fades. And Nariman started practicing in Supreme Court and Bombay High Court from 1950 onwards. The life of Constitution and the life of professional life of Nariman, same. And Nariman in his book says that in 1950 when you study constitutional law, you had only the Constitution. And in 2020, when you study constitutional law, you seldom look to the Constitution because you have a volume of material called judgments interpreting the various provisions of the Constitution. So that is constitutional law. That is applied jurisprudence. An example of applied jurisprudence. And the three branches under the Constitution, you will study under the constitutional law, executive, judiciary and parliament, legislature. In 1950, they had started a competition among them. A prime minister like Jawaharlal Nehru would not allow an institution called the Supreme Court to take extra advantage. And Nehru came at the inauguration of the Supreme Court sitting on 28th of January 1950 in a chamber room of the Parliament House. Supreme Court started. And Jawaharlal Nehru in the speech in front of the Chief Justice and other judges said that I don't accept or admire a few persons sitting or appeal on the decisions of the elected government. Elected government. We are elected representatives of the people who gave the Constitution to ourselves. And the Supreme Court judges listened to it very carefully, very silently. They did not retort. Those who are wise people, intelligent people would not retort to unnecessary comments. They acted. Then that day started a competition between the executive and parliament on the one side and judiciary on the other side. Where did it reach? It reached in I.C. Golaknath in 1967. Supreme Court said that 11 judges bench said that no parliament can amend any of the fundamental rights. Competition reached a stage of confrontation, second stage. Confrontation between the executive and parliament on the one side and the legislature on the judiciary on the other side. Then reached Keshavanda Bharati, the case for all cases, the mother of all cases in India, judgments in India, by a 13-judge member bench. And in the Keshavanda Bharati case, I.C. Golaknath was overruled, but the Keshavanda Bharati made the situation more arduous for the judiciary and for the legislature and executive, and the confrontation stage has reached a pinnacle, climax, saying that you can amend the Constitution, you can amend fundamental rights also, but you cannot amend the basic structure of the Constitution. Basic structure theory came even to the common law world, where American Supreme Court and British system were surprised that Indian judiciary has come out with a paradigm, with a principle, with a doctrine of basic structure. You can do it, but don't touch the basic structure. And what is basic structure? The court did not say. It is for the posterity, to the coming generation to decide as and when situations arise. Because every case before a court is a situation reaction test. And the court has to respond to that. And subsequently, in several constitution bench decisions like Ashok Kumar Thakur and all, Supreme Court has held that the judicial review is a basic structure of the Constitution, reservation to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe is a basic structure of the Constitution. So many factors have been found. And in 1973, this confrontation reached, and 1992, with the first judge's case, this confrontation has stopped and reached the third stage of confiscation. Supreme Court has confiscated all this. What is confiscated? The confiscation is the Constitution. They have confiscated the Constitution. And who is the custodian of the Constitution today? Supreme Court is the custodian of the Constitution today. Because of this competition stage and confrontation stage, they have confiscated custody of the Constitution. And now, after the third judge's case, with the judgment of the appointment of the judges also by the Supreme Court, this confiscation stage also is over. And now the fourth stage of conciliation. What Supreme Court gives, others have to take and be happy and go home. That is the fourth stage. So this how the Constitution has grown. There is an American case. Even though you are beginners, your constitutional law teachers will be coming and mentioning this case to you. Marbury versus Madison, 1803. American Supreme Court decided this case. I am not going to tell you the entire fact of the case, but I am going to tell you a very relevant thing. Chief Justice John Marshall said that in the judgment, okay, we are bound by the Constitution, we are under the Constitution, but what is Constitution we will say? What Constitution is we will say, because it is our duty to interpret the Constitution. That happened in India also. Jawaharlal Nehru said that we cannot appreciate a few appointed persons sitting over government actions. But what is Constitution? The Supreme Court of India has been saying. Interpretation of the Constitution from A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras in 1950, AIR 1950, Supreme Court 27. Till 2020, the interpretation of the Constitution is going on. And it is the history and it is the biography of the Supreme Court. It is a biography of the Supreme Court that the Constitution lives even today. And a writer, Professor Austin, in his book, Indian Constitution, the Cornerstone of a Nation, Professor Austin said that Constitution of India is not merely a legal document, but it is a document for India's social revolution. That social revolution has been discovered by the Supreme Court through public interest litigation, social action litigation, and the Supreme Court of India has shifted the pendulum from the point of philosophy of law to the sociology of law. That is judiciary. That is one applied jurisprudence you will be studying in all your branches, this constitutional law, all your actions, all your cases, constitutional law and its application is imperative. Then another applied jurisprudence is, just now I said, what is Constitution we will say. That is another paper you will be studying on interpretation of statutes. Interpretation is also nothing but jurisprudence. It is applied jurisprudence. Interpretation is the process by which the court interprets the statutes and comes to ascertain the intention of the legislature. A statute passed by the legislature, what is the intention of the legislature? We are not asking the MLAs and MPs, what did you intended while passing that act? No. Once you pass the act, once the president signs, once it is notified, the legislature has no control except to amend it. And interpretation work is done by the court. Statute of interpretation. Applied jurisprudence. Then there are ancillary jurisprudence and auxiliary jurisprudence, I will say. See, you will learn a lot of things other than law. That is auxiliary jurisprudence. Before you study law, you will be studying legal history. Before you study the core subjects in law, you will be studying economics. You will be studying political obligation. You will be studying Indian history, if it is 5-year course. So this is all you study for the purpose of learning law. You will be studying legal and constitutional history also. You will be studying the charters of Queen Elizabeth in 1600 charter, 1660 charter, 1726 judicial charter, then 1773 regulating act, 1783 charter act of 1793, 1813 charter act, 1833 charter act by which law commission was first law commission under Thomas Babington Macaulay came. Then 1853 Charter Act. Lot of things you will be studying. You will be studying the Indian Government of India Act 1958, Government of Councils Act 1893. Then 1909 Mindo-Morley reforms, Council of Act. Then Montagu-Chelmsford reforms 1919, and the all-powerful 1935 Government of India Act. Then the most relevant act, Indian Independence Act of 1947. These are all part and parcel of studying law, and this is auxiliary jurisprudence. Then after that you have ancillary jurisprudence, in the sense that you will be specializing. You will be specializing on intellectual property, you will be specializing on constitutional law, you will be specializing on administrative law. That is ancillary after the studying law. So this is a good area. This is a good opportunity. A good lawyer will be respected in the society, and a learned lawyer will be respected even by the bench. Why commissions are appointed from among the lawyers by the judges? Even when the judges find it difficult to decide a case, they ask a lawyer to go as a commission and find it. Why amicus curiae system is there? What is amicus curiae? Friend of the court. Judges, when famous cases, when all important cases in the Supreme Court, the bench appoints a one or two advocates as amicus curiae, friend of the court. So they will do research. As Mr. Pandian observed earlier, they will come to the court with dispassionate, objective, impartial material to assist the court to reach a just and reasonable decision. So this is one aspect. Now there are other branches of law, and in conclusion, what I would submit is that this legal education and legal profession, my request to each one of you students, my dear students, is that don't leave this profession. Be in this profession only. You be good lawyers. Don't leave the profession. By asking you don't leave the profession, that does not mean that you should not acquire or aspire for some other positions. Tomorrow you will be applying for civil service examinations, and you will become collectors or civil servants. Then also you will be lawyers once you have this law qualification. That sense of a lawyer, that sensibility of a lawyer will help you to deal with circumstances which was not expected. Unique circumstances. And even privacy is a fundamental right today because of the Puttaswamy judgment of the Supreme Court. And the privacy judgment begins with one sentence, the judgment of Justice Sikri. Sentence that it is one thing to become the first among several, and it is another thing to become the unique among all. And to becoming the first among several, that is the opportunity before you in the law school. And the law school prepares you to a larger opportunity to become a unique person. I wish you all good success to become unique persons in law, in this noble profession. And with this I conclude. Now again we have 5 more minutes. I can respond to any queries. Before we call it a day, we can. I did not know the passage of these 2 hours at all. Talking to you was a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from anybody? Anyone can ask, put questions.
See, the same question, answers will be different, can be different in different times. Albert Einstein was asked to set questions for examination. He set questions, and next year also he was asked to set the questions. He set the same questions. Then the students and the teachers complained that this fellow is an eccentric fellow. He has reproduced the same questions. Then Albert Einstein said that, "Array, you see, questions are same, but answers have changed. You are asked to answer this question in this year, current, the subject has improved. See, in the constitutional law, 2 years back, if a question is asked on right to privacy, you would have been giving one answer, and if today the right is asked, you will be answering a different question. You will be giving a different answer. So asking question is anyway. Then I can also make a few words in gratitude and thanks to Dr. V.L. Manisab and Hindustan Institute of Technology and its faculty members who were generous enough to accommodate me to have an interaction with your students, your esteemed institution and members of the faculty. I thank you, and I wish my little friends, whether it is boy or girl, whether it is man or woman, our profession will accommodate you equally with equanimity. Welcome to this profession and this field of law. I thank you immensely. Without any reservation, I thank all of you.
Thank you. I request our Professor Comrade, Vincent Comrade sir, to propose a vote of thanks.
It's nearing noon, but we were actually under a spell of the grand manifestation of the lot of experience Dr. Kailasnatha Pillai has acquired as a professor of law, deep analysis of jurisprudential thing, and then giving from the experience as an advocate from the lower side, that is Trivandrum, then going to the Supreme Court, and he has analyzed almost everything related to the legal profession, the nobility of the legal profession. He has given us how you have to approach each and every issue that comes before you, and he has given us almost whatever is needed for a beginner in law, quoting from Justice Frankfurter's letter to Paul Clausen, how an advice can be given to a young man who is interested to go into the law. So everything was given to the youngsters, the budding lawyers, we can say. The buds have already started, because from the day one, we can call them lawyers because they have started learning law. And Dr. Pillai's enunciation of so many concepts relating to the applied jurisprudence, how interpretation plays the role of applied jurisprudence, and he compared it to applied chemistry. It was a very, very interesting thing. And he has gone to the extent of this ancillary and auxiliary jurisprudence also. So these are words which actually we are not giving to the students so far. Even though I have been teaching jurisprudence for more than 25, 26 years, I have not gone to that extent. And it is a new learning experience for me to hear the sagacious expressions of our speaker of the day or the teacher of the day. So he has taught the teachers as well as the students. And the Hindustan University, the School of Law, on behalf of all the faculty members and this institution, I extend a warm and sincere and heartfelt thanks to Dr. Pillai sir.
Thank you, sir.
And
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I also thank all the participants, all the guests, all the professors, all the people from the management and advocates and other who have participated on each and every student who have participated in this occasion. From tomorrow onwards, we will have the regular classes, and you can contact your class teachers who have communicated with you regarding your classes, and there will be scheduled classes online as the present situation. There is a regular timetable, and regular classes will be there online, and you have been introduced the respective teachers who will be handling the subjects. And as new students, I am very happy to welcome all of you. And you are entering a great profession, as Dr. Pillai sir has mentioned. And it's a very good opportunity that is you have got in your life to come to the branch of law. and let us have a great time ahead in the institution, in the School of Law and in the Hindustan University as students. I request all cooperation in all possible manners from the students and their parents, and we will work as a team to make this institution a great success, and you will be given all kinds of support academically and for your success in your life, including guidances. And with these words, I am concluding. I am thankful to everybody, and especially today to the guest of this session, who is a very senior advocate of the Supreme Court of India, and he has taken much of his time to come and attend. And we are really happy to you and express our gratitude, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. With that, we call off today. Tomorrow we'll have the regular classes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.